Okay, so once again, good morning everyone. For us to discuss about the opportunities in solution and migration planning, let us all welcome Madam Sheila. Take it away, ma'am.
Ayan. Kita na po ba? Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Ayan. Sige po. Thank you. So, ayun po. Good morning. My name is Sheila Rose. As the previous topic to the introduction of the enterprise infrastructure, it was stated and concluded that the enterprise continuum provides a framework and context for the leveraging relevant architecture assets in executing ADM. So this asset may include architecture descriptions, models, and patterns taken from variety of different resources. So as explained, last time, I think si Sir Marmeto ata yung nagsabi na, if I rephrase ko na lang po, based on what I remember, every time that we are discussing about enterprise infrastructure, it is relevant places throughout the ADM architecture or yung development cycle niya is yung reminder that there are things that need to consider which architecture assets from the enterprise continuum the architect should use. So, hindi lang yung pinaka problem yung chine-check natin, pero kung ano ba yung mga need na solution in the resources that is available that can be accepted to the enterprise organization. So if you have any input or additional information in regards to my topic about opportunities and solution and migration planning, your inputs and knowledge will be highly appreciated. I believe that in these phases po kasi sa ADM, may iba't ibang ways how to implement it depende sa architecture's design or model na ginagamit ng kahit sinong organization, lalo-lalo na po yung mga taga-industry. So your inputs and knowledge will be highly appreciated later if you have any inputs in regards to the topic. In line with that, my topic is about one of the important cycle in the ADM, the practical implementation of the enterprise continuum will often take the form of repository that includes backing up the architecture design, the models, the patterns that is already accepted or can be accepted within the enterprise. I will be discussing the basic structure, the objectives, the different approach, the inputs and outputs, and the steps in applying these phases. The basic structure is known as the architectural development cycle. Throughout the ADM cycle, there are the things that need to look for a frequent validation of result against the original expectation for those that we are trying to collect and provide the solution for the particular phases of the process. Hindi ko sure kung kita sa PowerPoint, pero yun po yung pagkakasunod-sunod ng bawat phases for the ADM cycle in regards in creating of the solution for the enterprise architecture. The preliminary phase, this is the part where the vision was being defined and the need for the architectural change. Every time that we are applying the steps in phases of ADM cycle, lagi natin tinitingnan kung ano yung basic needs, ano yung kailangan na solution for the specific problem, for the infrastructure na nag-i-exist na for the organization itself. And this part, dito nilalagay yung lahat ng thoughts and vision, how are we going to change the infrastructure in the best way that the enterprise will lead into a success pattern. This part define the needs of the architectural change. So dito dito nagkakaroon ng brainstorming, dito nagkakaroon ng thoughts, opinion regarding sa nag-i-exist na model na meron yung architecture na yun. And the next phases, which is yung phase B, phase C, and phase D phases, these are the parts where we develop a clear description of the future architectural design of the specific enterprise that could be enable the need of the solution. So dito nabubuo yung mga possible solution, ano yung pwede nating gawin, ano yung kailangan nating i-input for that specific phases. The phases shown in the architectural development cycle in the PowerPoint, nandyan yung business architecture, yung information system architecture, yung technology architecture. Normally, ito yung mga diniscuss natin for the past few weeks. Ano yung mga nangyayari, ano yung kailangan natin i-consider na model of architectures. Ito yung mga napag-usapan natin about networks, the network of topologies that can be applied, that can be accepted. Internet infrastructure, ano yung mas magandang infrastructure for that specific organization. And for the particular beneficiary ng ginagawa nating model for that organization. And yung domains. So, patulad din yung diniscuss ni Sir Joshua, I think nasa part siya ng information system architecture, yung network. All the planning consideration of these phases, of these models, for the infrastructure and architecture will be transferred to the next cycle, which are the phases E and F. And these are my topic. Yung opportunities and solution, then yung migration planning. For the opportunities and solution, it is known as the part of the cycle where we look at how the vision and the future architectures are being delivered. Technically, based on what I have read and what I have researched, this is the part that once that we created the vision for the enterprise change or infrastructure change for the specific organization or beneficiary, maglalagay na tayo ng possible solution, ano yung magandang strategy for that problem. Then this is the part sa phases ng cycle kung saan napag-uusapan na maminit ba yung mga requirements na to, mapapasok ba siya sa parameter of change, kapag ba nagkaroon ng major changes of the infrastructure of the enterprise, mag-a-adjust ba or ma-adapt ba ng mga people who are beneficiary of that specific infrastructure. So opportunities and solutions identify the parameters of change, the major phases along the way, and the top level projects to be undertaken in moving from the current environment to the target. The output of phase C, the output of the opportunities and solution will form the basis of the implementation plan. It requires to move to the target architecture. Sometimes in this process of identifying the implementation plan requires to move to the target architecture. In identifying the new application of this specific phases, in this case, it may be necessary to iterate between phase E and previous phases. So dito pa lang, alimbawa kapag from the previous phases kung saan nagbibigay na tayo ng solution and strategy for the specific vision of the enterprise changes. Dito sa phases na to, dun pa lang tayo nagkakaroon ng comments. How are we going to accept those strategy and those solution na sinasuggest from the previous phases. So that's why it's really important to discuss in these spaces yung mga possible opportunities and solutions sa mga based na naging comment from the previous spaces, because parang ang pinaka-thoughts kasi in this ADN cycle is kapag halimbawa you are trying to create a new infrastructure for a specific enterprise, then hindi naman kaya siyang ma-meet or hindi kaya mag-adapt dun yung mga beneficiary for that enterprise sa kine-create na infrastructure. Sayang lang yung oras, sayang lang yung effort din, yung money din. So, it's better that in this cycle, dito pa lang nakikita na yung mga butas or mga kailangan pang i-discuss or kailangan ng hindi dapat ituloy from the whole plan of the cycle. Phase E is well named about the finding opportunities for delivering the target architecture by implementing specific solutions. Opportunities and solutions identifies the parameters of change, the major phases along the way, and the top-level project to be undertaken in moving from the current environment to the target. Yun nga, yung kanina, dito pa lang natin chine-check kung ano yung mga kailangan nating tignan at the same time. Dito kaya siya tinawag na opportunities and solutions because ito yung nagbibigay tayo ng comment for the strategy that we are trying to create for the solution, for the problem. So we are trying to give a solution for the infrastructure na nag-e-exist na, and we want to create a better infrastructure for the enterprise. In these phases, we are going to discuss, is it possible ba? Is it accepted ba? Ito yung medyo critical in all the phases because sometimes we are trying our best to give the solution na nahihirapan tayo i-identify na kailangan ba talaga to, required ba siya na i-update to, kailangan ba siyang baguhin. So dito pa lang because some of the organization are trying to give different strategy for the better infrastructure. But sometimes kasi hindi naman na kailangan pa or mas maganda, parang mas better pa yung nag-i-exist infrastructure kesa sa pinopropose na infrastructure new model na na diniscuss from the previous phases. So during this final step of the opportunities and solution, there's a different type of specification of building blocks. It must be verified that the organization's specific requirements will be met. So at the end of the day, in these phases, all the strategy talk from the previous phases, yung mga possible strategy and model na gustong i-apply for the new design of the infrastructure, at the end of the day, they want na namimit pa rin ba nito yung requirements na hinihingi ng specific organization na yon. And these steps take this output and consolidate them. Analyze the dependencies, the reconcile differences, and confirm again. So dito nangyayari yung double checking. Hindi ko alam kung tama yung term, pero yun. Chine-check, ay dito nagkakaroon ng critical phase kung i-accept or i-reject yung mga possible solution for the infrastructure design model for the enterprise. This is the part where the refines and update the requirement architecture documentation and architecture roadmap. Roadmap that is the key for the output cut of the implementation of the migration plan. So what is the objectives of the of this phase of the opportunities and solutions? Bakit siya kailangan part ng cycle ng ADM? For this objective, the opportunities and solution exist to evaluate and select among the implementation options to identify from the beginning of development of the various target architectures is already met. For example, build versus buy, mas okay bang i-reuse na lang tong option na to or kailangan pang bumili ng bago or kailangan baguhin yung pinaka-part na to na infrastructure. So dito kasi nagkakaroon ng major decision in accepting the new strategic or new model for the infrastructure. In identifying the strategic parameters for change and the top-level work for packages or project to be undertaken in moving from the current environment to the target. Next is yung it can assess the dependencies, the cost, and the benefits of the various project. And yung nag-generate niyo yung overall implementation and migration strategy in detailed implementation plan. So, bago kasi siya mag-transfer sa migration plan, kung saan doon nangyayari yung implementation plan for the new model for the infrastructure enterprise na na pinopropose from the previous phases, dito pa lang nagkakaroon na agad ng detailed input so that in the next phase, madali na siyang ilatag into an implementation plan so that it can execute it well. Phase E generates the first complete version of the architecture roadmap. By combining the analysis and the suggestion from the architecture development phases of B, C, and D, ito yung mga input strategy and model design. These phases concentrates on how to deliver the architecture. So it looks that if you are actually creating an architecture roadmap listing work. So for the packages of timeline to realize na yung target architecture mo that can meet the change and kahit na gaano kalaki yung scalability niya, at least nakikita mo yung bigger picture how you will proceed it one by one. So from the baseline to the target architecture. And this is also the phase that produces an incremental approach made up of intermediate or transition architecture. In this phase, the maps are required architectural changes to investment program and projects that have funding and resources to carry out the work packages and deliver the transitions and target architectures, the inputs to the phase and input of the phases, and also what are the different resources that should use from the earlier phases planning. So after magawa yung roadmap from the baseline of planning, so na-accept yung mga strategic, yung mga model for the infrastructure design, na-reject yung mga hindi naman dapat ilagay for the change, dito nilalagay yun sa roadmap. Then after for the phase E, magta-transfer na siya for the next phase. Yun na nga yung phase F, yung migration planning. So sa migration planning, doon nangyayari yung pag-create ng implementation plan. For the phase F, it addressed the detailed migration planning to move from the baseline to the target architectures. The early phases of ADM. For the next part na yun, yung after kasi ng, lagi kasing magkasama si phase E and phase F. From phase E, automatic na kapag natapos na siya, naibabato na siya sa migration planning so that it can proceed to the cycle and makita yung execution plan for the infrastructure change. So it addressed the detailed migration planning from na nakuha niyang data sa operation and solution, ilalagay niya na siya into ipa-plot niya yon so that it can be easily to pass it to the execution phases. It already identify in this part yung need for the architectural change and also nandun na rin yung development, business, data application, and technology architectures na nagsusupport for the need ng change na yun. And the objective of the migration planning is to sort the various implementation projects into priority order. Activities include assessing the dependencies, the cost, the benefits of the various migration projects. The priorities list of project will go on to the form of the basis of the detailed implementation plan and the migration plan. Phase F addresses the detailed migration planning to move from the baseline to the target architecture of the early phases of the ADM. Yun nga, katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, laging hindi sila magkahiwalay sa cycle, lagi silang magkasama because in every step of the way na nangyayari sa phase E, tina-transfer agad siya sa phase F, sa migration planning, para magawa agad yung implementation planning for the infrastructural change. It already identified in this part the need for architectural change and the need for the developing, the business data application and the technology architecture to support the need information. While the opportunities and solutions produce a high-level implementation, asking the question, what are the things need to consider, identifying the target problem, Then, once na masagot yung mga question na yon, it will transfer to the migration plan to exist the leverage of investment opportunities and to identify the specific solution to deliver the target architecture phase. In approaching this part of the cycle sa phase E, normally we are asking this question, the important question. Nandito kasi talaga yung mga yung documentation. In proceeding to the execution ng strategy and new model na gustong i-implement, ito yung mga normally na tinatanong to know if nasasagot ba yung problema or the same time na i-present niya ba ng tama yung binibigay na information na nanggaling sa phase E. So these are the questions. What are the implications of this project on the projects and activities? What are the dependencies between this project and other projects activities? What are the needed? Ito yung mga resources part. What components must be developed? Does the organization have the resources needed to develop such components? What standards are the products of components built on? When will they be available? Will the product stand the test of time, both because of the technology they are using and also because of the viability of the supplier, availability of the supplier? What is the cost of retraining the user? What is the likely cultural impact to the user in the community? What is the total cost of the migration? The benefits once it will deliver, and it is important to look the actual benefits and not presume the not presume the whole phase of the cycle. So, and is the migration be viable and suitable? In phase F, sa migration planning, it also finalized the detailed implementation and migration plan together with the final architecture roadmap. So from the architectural roadmap, dito nangyayari yung pinaka-approval of execution. This is also the part na sa plan na kino-coordinate siya sa pinaka-change management, yung mga people in charge for that specific enterprise. We approach within the enterprise and with other initiatives within the overall change portfolio. Finally, as we discussed sa phase F in migration planning, in order to ensure the people, the key stakeholders, to fully understand the business value, the cost of work packages, the transition and future architectures, whereas the early phases of ADM are very much directed by the enterprise architecture. Yun nga, kanina sinabi ko po, there are different steps in terms of applying these two phases in ADM cycle, in development cycle, in changing of infrastructure enterprise. I read some articles na iba yung way nila, lalo na sa mga industry. Iba yung part kung saan, kunyari ito, sa cycle na to, nasa gitna pa lang na ilalagay na yung phase E and phase F kung saan nagkakaroon na ng discussing of the solution and strategy proposal, yung new model na i-implement. Pero may iba na organization sa dulong part siya or sa unahang part na nilalagay. So we all have different ways to apply these phases, but at the end of the day, this is really important in terms of the ADM cycle, development cycle, because this is the critical part. Yun nga yung kanina sinabi ko, it's a critical part kung saan ano yung i-accept, ano yung i-reject in terms of the new strategy, new planning, and new model na i-implement for the change of the infrastructure in the enterprise. And yun, from the previous phases, nandun yung mga napag-usapan natin about technical in terms of how are we going to create a solution, how are we going to put the strategic way para ma-provide yung yung ine-expect nating vision from the first stage of the planning of ADM. And that's it. That's my presentation about migration planning and operation solutions. Do you have any inputs in regards to this topic or questions?
Okay, I just want to add on some actually summary of the presentation. Okay, so stay your presentation. So stay with ano. So again, our presenter discussed already about the embarking on a migration exercise, of course, on how what will be the approach. Because many things affects the answer to this to the questions given by our presenters, including the current and future architectures, no, the size of the organization and its complexity, and the value of technology to the core functions of the organization. So other things to consider are the asset value of the current system and the level of risk associated with changing the solutions and or the supplier, as our presenter mentioned. So most organizations find that a change of architecture has too much impact on the organization to be undertaken in a single phase, because migration often requires consideration of a number of technical issues, not at least of which are those associated with the means of introducing change of operational system. So of course, the issue requiring special considerations may include parallel operation, choices of proceeding with phase migration of subsystem by function or by functions, and the impact of geographical separation on migration. The decision resulting from this consideration should be incorporated in the implementation plan. No? There are a number of strategies for developing the migration and implementation plan. The most successful basic strategy is to focus on projects that will deliver short-term payoffs and so create an impetus for proceeding with longer-term projects. One common approach is to implement business function is data-driven through chronological sequence. So create the application and supporting technology that create data before those that process the data, before those that simply store or archive or delete data. So to determine the future disposition of current system, of course, we need to consider the mainstream, the constraint, and the replace system. Okay, so for the key business drivers to be addressed that will also tend to dictate the sequence of implementation, such as reduction of cost, consolidation of services, ability to handle change, and a goal to have a minimum intern solutions. So another possible complementary approach is for the individual projects or work packages to be group sorted in a series of flashbacks, no? Each of which can be achieved in a realistic time scale, of course. So the input, of course, the request for architecture work, statement, target business architecture, target technology architecture, target data architecture, and impact analysis is also important. So a while ago, our presenter discussed about the key step in phase, for phase F, no, the prioritized projects, estimate resource requirements and availability, perform cost benefits assessment on the various mitigation projects, perform risk assessment, generate implementation roadmap, document the migration plan. It is always important for us to document our migration plan. Of course, the main output of this phase F is the impact analysis, no? The detailed implementation plan and migration plan specifically. No? So I think that's it for this topic.